This is the Future Christian Podcast, a conversation about church leadership, fresh ideas, and the future of the church. Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Loren Richmond Jr. is in conversation with Michelle Huneven. Michelle is the author of 6 novels, most recently Search and Bug Hollow. She teaches creative writing at UCLA. Among other honors she has received a James Beard Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and a Literature Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She lost her house in Altadena, California in the Eden Fire, so while rebuilding, she lived in Los Angeles with her husband, dog, and talkative African gray parrot. A reminder before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. Connect with Loren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. Shoot us an email at loren@resonatemediapro.com with comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes. Your support means a lot to us in making this independent podcast possible.
This is Loren Richmond Jr., and today I'm pleased to be joined by Michelle Huneven. Hello, and thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Loren. Glad to be here.
Looking forward to this conversation. Share anything else you want to let folks know about yourself.
Well, I'm a novelist. I've written 6 novels, 2 of which are what I call my church novels. My second novel is called James Land, and it has a brand new minister navigating a difficult church. And then I wrote Search, which was my 5th novel, about a search committee looking for a new minister at a Unitarian Universalist church in California. I teach at UCLA. I teach creative writing and sometimes food writing in the English department. I live in Los Angeles, California. And my house burned down in the Altadena fires.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
how does that, if you don't mind my asking, how has that been recovery?
Oh, it's been so much, and it's ongoing. It doesn't stop. I mean, there's still insurance, there's SBA loans, there's constructing a new house. We lost 2 houses. So it's just an ongoing project. The initial shock has dimmed somewhat, but it's going to be a few years before we can put it behind us.
Yeah. Wow. Well, my heart goes out to you, and I hope that.
Thank you.
Hope that continues the process, strength for your, endurance, if anything, right, in that process. Well, Michelle is the author. Yeah, Michelle is the author of the book Search. And gosh, is there a subtitle of this, Michelle?
Well, Search is a fictional memoir written by somebody who was on a search committee. So it's a little meta, as they say in literary terms.
Sure.
It's called Search, a memoir with recipes by Dana Louise Patowski, a novel by Michelle Huneven. A lot of people don't quite get that, so they think I'm Dana. But I'm not Dana, thank God, because Dana has slightly questionable ethics. Because one of the reasons that she's on the search committee is that she needs to write another book. Her agent and publisher are pressuring her. And this opportunity comes up to be on a search committee. And she thinks, oh, well, that's a year-long project, and maybe I'll get a book out of it. Questionable ethics. One shouldn't join a search committee for that reason.
Well, I will sheepishly admit I had some uncertainty as to whether you were literally Dana or not, and I'm, from my own moral foundations, I suppose, I'm relieved to hear that was not a literal thing that happened, because I would also wonder, this seems a little bit problematic, to say the least. So, you mentioned this is your second church-themed book. Like, I'm going to have to check out, is it James Land, you said? I'm going to have to check that out if it's anything as good as this book. But I would love to hear more. Why write a book on the theme of like a church search committee?
Well, a couple reasons. One, as I said, I teach at UCLA, and I put my hat in on a couple searches, and just at UCLA, and I wasn't selected. The first time there was no funding, they cut the funding, and the second time they hired some other people, but they did give me some. They sweetened my deal there. And I had a friend who was on the search committee who sort of told me a lot of what was going on. So there were lots of machinations there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was on a small search committee at my church, and it was just for, I can never remember if it's an associate, I have a block, or an assistant minister. The
Yeah,
one
sure.
that's the one that's hired, not called. And it took us 3 months. It was completely convivial, but I remember exactly where I was. I was walking into the choir room when I got an idea for this novel. And I thought, this whole process of getting to know ministers is very novelistic. First you swipe right, as it were, and pick a few
Yeah.
just online, and then you exchange. Um, uh, the church sends out its packet, and the
Mm-hmm.
minister sends in their packet, or and you just, how the characterization deepens, and how you get to know these characters bit by bit until they're face to face at the church, um, and you each encounter on paper, and then in person you get to know them more, and that seemed very novelistic to me. And also, it's structurally like a novel. You start out not knowing something, and you have this arrow pointing towards a conclusion. So I thought, this would make a perfect novel. But I had to sweeten the stakes. I had to make it for a main minister.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had to add tension. Well, one of the things that they gave us, even for this little search committee, was uh, the handbook for searches, which laid out step by step what happens in the search. So that was my structure for a novel right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
It's
filled in the
funny.
blanks.
Yeah. It's funny you are a novelist because I had to look up the word convivial, what that meant.
Oh.
You used the word novelistic. The reason I wanted to have this conversation, because this, even again, why, even though it is fictional, as you say, it felt very sociological. And that's kind of how I want to approach this conversation, because
Mhm.
I think you named in this fictional way many dynamics that I think happen in search committees or searches, like you say, whether in church or in other contexts. And I think something that I've noticed that I'm curious about is that search committees can often drift from their stated criteria and kind of get into these, I don't know how else to say it, like gut decisions.
Mhm.
Share more about that.
Well, I think that one of the things that happened with this search committee, but can happen with many other search committees, in an attempt to make a committee that reflects a lot of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this committee, for example, is too big,
Mm-hmm.
and there are too many people on it, but they wanted to represent each part of the church, the musical part, the diversity part, you name it. And
Right.
they can, the idea is to make a church in miniature.
Right.
Um,
Right.
However, it can also just split into factions where
Yeah.
each person is so stuck on their own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
However, they can also, it's a complicated question because a church really needs to know itself and what it's looking for.
Yeah.
And my church in this book has just been tootling along. It's been healthy. It's got a big endowment. They
Mm-hmm.
don't really do any soul searching.
Yeah.
And so they're prone to the next pretty thing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. have a minister who is going to take charge of a capital campaign to enlarge, for example, the grounds or something like that. They want what every church wants. They want a good preacher who's also very pastoral.
Right.
But they haven't really done the soul searching necessary. And so they're prone to factionalize, and they're prone to be subject to a whim.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about, you said, again, in this sort of fictional search committee you made up, you talk about how it's too big, there's too many kind of voices or perspectives. And I'm thinking about how, especially like in a church, and I'm curious, like in your experience, like at UCLA or other big institutions, like there's some amount of like folks who are like institutionalists who are like, we need to protect the brand or the identity or the legacy of the institution. There's some folks who are like, we just need to go forward and move forward toward the future. I'm not sure what the question is to ask, but I think, what have you seen, or what thoughts come to mind when you think about these competing factions, if you will, around what are the primary things we're chasing after?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that affected a lot of search committees in some churches, certainly in Unitarian Universalist churches, was the need to diversify.
Yeah.
It's a very white denomination.
Right.
And so, for example, on this search committee, in order to get a diverse search committee, they have someone who's been at the church for 3 months. He's Filipino. He's a dear, dear guy. He's a wonderful guy, but he doesn't really know anything about the church and its theology, or lack of theology, as the case may be.
You can say that on this podcast.
So I think that you run into it says in the search committee handbook, the people that know the church well, that understand its finances, that understand its theology, its history. And there are too many people on the search committee that just don't. They're too new. And a couple of them just look at the older people as, past their due date.
Right. Yeah, and this is what I think made this book so interesting, because I think it reflects like these broader sociological trends that we're dealing with as a nation, as like, do we kind of protect and preserve institutionalism, or do we say we need to write off institutionalism and just again, I think this was what made the book, to me at least, so interesting, even broader than church, but certainly these dynamics play out in church.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not against diversity, and one of the most responsible people on the search committee is what you would call a diverse member. I think, a lot of people say, oh, you have to lower the standards to have diversity. Well, not necessarily. You can lower the standards and just have, mediocre white people. So, I mean, it was tricky dealing with that also at the time I was dealing with it, because, I had a sensitivity read of the book, because these are issues that, I wanted to be careful about and respectful of.
Right.
But I think in this case, not knowing what they needed in precise, particular detail led to some larger mistakes. And they got sidetracked by ideas that they hadn't even thought about.
Yeah. I want to stay on that point, because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this in the story, the UU Church, for folks unfamiliar, Unitarian Universalist Church, is congregationally governed, congregational
Mhm.
polity, which is very similar to other church governance or church denominations such as my own, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, United Church
Uh-huh.
of Christ. Other denominations have, looser or very similar forms of congregational dynamics or governance. There's a few denominational structures where the denomination itself puts in a clergy leader, like I'm attending
Mhm.
a Methodist church right now where that's the
Mhm.
case, and there's pros and cons to that for sure. So I'm not sure again how to ask this, but I imagine again in different contexts, whether in church or in, I suppose, in secular institutions, to use that word,
Mhm.
there's this challenge of knowing what an institution needs.
Mhm.
Have you seen that play out? What additional thoughts do you have on that?
Um, well, there are always these surveys and these meetings for mission statements,
Mm-hmm.
and they might be the best we can do, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not very effective. There's often not a good return on surveys. Um, they often don't quite get at the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they also ask a lot of people who've never thought about these questions to answer them.
Yeah.
Uh, it might be the best thing to have. I mean, the Methodists, I talk about the Methodists in the
Right.
book,
Right.
and it is kind of like, which is better, an arranged marriage or a love marriage?
Yeah.
And it has kind of all of the dangers of a love marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who know each other and get to know each other, and maybe even do a lot of premarital counseling to talk about difficult things like money and sex. Um, in a church context, that would be really frank discussions of what problems the church might have financially,
Right.
what their ambitions are going forward. Uh, uh, the church in this book has been so comfortable. It's got a good endowment. It just sort of bumps along, and they haven't really asked themselves the hard questions. What will happen if the school that rents the church suddenly leaves?
Mm-hmm.
What will happen if we have a major fire or uh, a windstorm that takes the roof off or something like that? They haven't they haven't looked knowingly into the future, and they interview some old hands that will ask those questions. But it's not something that the search committee focuses on because the survey hasn't come up with that. And at a certain point, they're too busy jousting with each other to get down and dirty about what the church actually needs.
Yeah. Something that struck me as I read this is that in many ways, the person, or I think this happens too in churches or institutions, the person who would be best suited to lead that organization is by far the least appealing. Is that too unfair?
um, it's possible, yes. Um, they're boring.
Yeah.
They're boring. They're not shiny.
Yes.
They're institutionalists. They've got a lot of experience. They they are a little bit humdrum.
Mm-hmm.
They don't promise the world.
Right.
You know, they know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
And
This
yeah.
is what your caricature character, I'm not sure what the best word to use there, of Alana, sort of as this charismatic, appealing, checks all the boxes, but none of the boxes at the same time. Again, is a dynamic that I see in churches, and this is kind of the inverse of that. In many ways, the exact opposite of what a congregation like the one you described in your book would need. And I'm just curious, like, I don't think this is something that's unique to church. I mean, in many ways, I think we're seeing this lived out in our nation's governance right now of,
Yeah.
of this appeal for charismatic, dynamic leaders. And I'm just wondering, like, if you've given thought to what that's about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think with churches, as you know, there's been a huge drop in attendance
Mm-hmm.
and church membership. And so people think they need to do something about that. And so they
Yeah.
want to, and certainly, they always, as long as I've been a church attendee, they want young people.
Right.
There's that gap where they leave after high school, they go away to college and they never come back. And so the eternal idea of how to attract young people,
Right.
and also the dire straits of churches losing members, I think led people to think, well, we need something new and interesting and vibrant and different. And I know that a lot of people, there was a period when I was writing the book, there was a period when a lot of people were being hired right out of seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And, in seminary, I went to seminary for 2 years with the idea of becoming a minister.
Yeah.
So I know how excited you get for all these new things that are being presented, all these new ideas that are being presented in seminary. You
Right.
can't wait to take them to a church. And of course, there you run up against the institutionalists at that
Yes.
church
Years.
who think they want change. This is what Jamesland was sort of about. I had a friend who was a Methodist minister, and she won the pastoral award. She won the preaching award. She was just brilliant and wonderful, and she's actually had a great career in the Methodist Church. But her first church, um, she she just, she was full of ideas and she was brilliant, but she got a little church in Orange County, and she just ran up against basically her secretary, but
Mm-hmm.
also the members who they were thrilled to get her because she was terrific, but they didn't really want to implement all of her
Right.
ideas right away in the first year or two.
It's funny. I think there's many pastors out there who might say the secretary in their context is also the biggest resistor of ideas.
And also she took on a church that had lost their beloved minister something like many years, maybe 10 years or something, which is unusual for a Methodist
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
um, minister to stay that long. So the church lost this beloved minister. So my friend would call me up and she would say, the grief is back,
Yeah.
because they took their anger and their sadness out on the new person. So
Yep.
there's that transitional. I mean, there's so many issues in a church, which is why it's endlessly interesting. Churches are
Yeah.
endlessly interesting. They're human structures that are endlessly fascinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with you on that. So in the story, charisma and an image really seem, and we've kind of touched on this already, they really seem to be a strong contributing factor in the decision-making process, even less so on qualifications. I mean, I think that's what struck me the most. How have you seen that play out in other contexts?
Hmm.
What do you think an institution or a church can do to, I don't want to say like guard against that, but also not, it just seemed like folks got caught up in the energy and emotion of this idea of Alana as a pastor.
Yeah, they argued, and to some extent, it wasn't a bad argument that this church had been big enough. It's had a lot of interns, a lot of um, assistant or associate ministers, I can't remember which, that they've loved into being good ministers. They've supported them, they've helped them learn. They haven't done that with a senior minister because they always had very qualified senior ministers, but a little bit overconfident that her shortcomings can be easily fixed, or she can just be loved into a good minister. And it's not a bad thing to think. It's a supportive church that quietly, dealt with difficult problems. It's a fairly healthy church, although not as healthy as everybody thinks.
Right.
I don't know. I talked to so many people about searches, and there was an Episcopal bishop I talked to who said, she was on a search committee, and she said, I was so against the candidate that they finally chose. And now I have to admit that he was exactly the right person that we needed. He's been great.
Interesting.
I talked to somebody at an institution, at an academic institution, who said, I lobbied so hard for this person. Her husband walked away when she started talking about the search because he was so sick of it. She said, I lobbied so hard for this person, and I browbeat everybody into, getting her there. And she has been a disaster. So, I mean, I've heard the whole gamut of stories where it's an imperfect process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but you have to be somewhat vulnerable to fall for a person who's full of brand new ideas and who is also physically beautiful.
Yeah.
Young, physically beautiful, dynamic. You hope she's going to attract every young person in the town, and we're human.
Right. Right.
We're human.
You mentioned kind of, again, in this story, how the church was not as healthy as they might think they were, or as they seemed. Certainly I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, whether in church or in institutions, like a bad leader come in and really just tank things. And I'm curious, does that reflect more on the institutional health as a whole, or is it really just, does it simply come down to bad leadership? And I guess the question is this, can healthier institutions better withstand bad leaders?
It remains to be seen nationally.
Yeah. Yes.
Where I don't know, because what can a church do? I mean, they can cut their pledges. That's a big sign. They can leave.
Yeah.
Another big sign, but that sort of doesn't help. They can band together and get rid of a minister. Difficult, demoralizing. Ideally, churches withstand this. I just wonder how many churches at this stage of, loss of churchgoers can withstand it. I don't know. I'm not really an expert on it, but at all. I think it depends. It depends on the inherent health of the church, because as one of my characters says to some of the others, we're the church. The leader is not the church. We members are the church.
Right.
And it depends how strong that feeling is.
Yeah. And I think that's a good ethos, certainly for a church. That's something I've heard from Methodists, and perhaps your own kind of Methodist connections gave that ethos too. So I think that's a good ethos. And certainly I think institutionally, we want institutions to be more than simply about leaders. But like you said, there is that challenge. And I don't know, do you think this is something that's unique to American culture where, like you said, if we don't like what's going on, rather than staying in it and making our, signing up or not signing up, or I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's easier to take our ball and go home, to stop giving, right, to stop attending, stop pledging.
And, a church can have a not great minister, but a great religious education program,
Right.
or a
Right.
great pastoral care team.
Right.
So it depends. It depends how much damage the minister does to those sort of other parts of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about self-awareness, because this is something towards the end of the book, as you illustrate this church struggling under some unfortunate circumstances, like I think that school left, right? That was in the book, supporting the church, which is, again, a realistic dynamic that many churches have key tenants that are really supporting the budget, and also just perhaps some poor leadership decisions by the pastor. But the I hate to say the word, but there's always the excuse given in the book, and I think we see this again more broadly, is, oh, these are just broader trends. Like, we're just a victim of broader trends, which is true. But also, how do you encourage institutions or churches to be more self-aware? I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. I think I did belong to a healthy, self-aware church, where the older members that had been there for a long time were gloriously self-aware, and it ran really well, and that was they really knew the church, and they knew themselves, and they knew. It had a lot of very successful programs. It was aware that that's what it took to keep the church healthy. I don't know. It's a good question. We had these things called chalice groups that I think in my book I called soul circles or something.
Yeah.
Where they were trying to address not just people's own personal theology and beliefs, but also how to connect with the church. One of the things that they ask is that all members do some outreach, do some sort of active outreach, join the pastoral care team, or teach in the school, in the religious education, or do any number of the community outreach programs that we had. But I don't know how much that contributes to self-awareness. What do you think contributes to self-awareness in the church?
I think, like you said, honest conversations help. And I guess I think about this because this is something that I feel like I have to wrestle with myself as an individual. Like, certainly we want to be aware of broader trends, but also I think if we're not honest with ourselves about our own shortcomings and limitations, like, I'd be curious if this is something I feel like happens when struggling churches are looking to hire a pastor. And I'm curious, like, if this dynamic showed up in your Jamesland book of, like, a church that's just blissfully unaware of, like, how not a good job they would be, and think of themselves as, like, like, we are such an in-demand church. And then, I had this when I interviewed at one church. I was like, I'm aware that I'm young and inexperienced and not high demand. Do you all recognize, like, you're the opposite end of that? You're old, you're struggling, you're declining, and you're not a high demand church.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I always loved, and I stole this from somebody. I don't remember who, when they said, you're young, you're inexperienced. And he said, well, what can I do about that? Time will take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask about something I meant to ask already, but I think it's such a thing that happens so often is who was the character that was a really strong character?
Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny.
Yeah.
Let me ask this too, just for fun. Like, as you're writing this, do you find, like, your favorite characters and your least favorite characters? As an author, do you find yourself, like, really, enjoying wanting to hang out with the character, or just gritting your teeth at a character?
Yeah, well, Jenny, exactly. There are characters that I really enjoyed and was and actually Jenny was one of them. She walked onto the page unbidden, just like her personality, and she took over. I did know deep in the back of my mind, I had read that, you know, that in a consensus situation, the most radical people tend to prevail because
Yes.
they hold out.
Yes.
Consensus is really dangerous for that reason. Um, but she would say things, I would be writing along, and she would say things that would just make me laugh and laugh as if I hadn't even invented them. She was so irritating. And she was right in a lot of ways. Jenny's main thing was, my folks grew up in this church with a minister that was kind of their age. They all had kids together. They grew the church together, and she wanted that for herself and her child.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really wonderful thing to want. However, she maybe pushed her agenda a little too aggressively.
Yeah.
And also, I've seen this teaching, and I saw it right after I finished this book. It's like I manifested it in my classroom, where a really strong, unhealthy personality can take over. I had a small class of 12 students, and I had a student who was just oppositional,
Yeah.
and she got, it was a writing class. She got the weaker students behind her, and I had some very talented students in that class, one of whom had already published a book, and they went into the background. They kind of faded away because she was so dominant. So how is it that this person who was sort of unstable mentally, not particularly talented, became the dominant force in the class? And it was so interesting to watch. I mean, it's a group dynamic. I read a lot about group dynamics when I was writing this book. But it was a little bit gratifying to know that it does happen that way.
Well, I'm biting my tongue to make additional comments regarding this happening on a broader scale, what you just described. But let me ask this.
Yes.
Have you seen it? Like, how have you seen groups resist that? Because, like, again, the consensus model is in many church denominational settings like the norm. And I'm just curious, like, because that is a realistic thing. Is like I've seen it myself, where a strong personality really can set the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen work, whether in church or institution, to resist that?
Yeah. I don't know. One of the things is, and this might be getting ahead of us, and it might not be the answer to the question, but caring. Dana's problem, even though she's writing a book about this, one of her problems with the search committee is that she cares.
Right.
She finds that she really cares, and at one point, one of the other members says to her, "There you go, caring again," And I think that actually caring, a lot of people on search committees don't have a pony in the race, don't have a dog in the race, and they don't care that much. And they're not that committed. So I guess the commitment of commitment and self-knowledge, as you pointed out, can go a long way to combat this. But if you have a search committee where people aren't deeply committed or they think they know the church, but they don't because they haven't been there that long or they
Right.
haven't participated that fully. So I think that really caring is probably the only antidote. On the
Yeah.
other hand, one of the ways to survive a search committee is to just not care that much.
Oh,
You know, I had
yeah.
a friend who was on a search committee and really cared and didn't get what she wanted and was miserable. And then she was on another search committee and she just didn't really, all the candidates were fine. She didn't really care. And she said that was so much better to not really have somebody that she really wanted.
Well, I'm going to recommend this episode for everybody who ever has or will serve on a church committee. This book is so much, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's such an entertaining read. And you did such a good job writing it. And I think, again, why it's resonated with me and so many folks I've talked to is because it really names a core dynamic that is absolutely true. So, yeah, I think, gosh, the book is Search. I know there's more questions I want to ask about this in this conversation, but for now, let's take a break and we'll come back with some closing questions. We're back with Michelle Huneven, and thank you so much for this conversation. Really recommend the book, if only, to, I suppose, get a little frustrated and laugh at others might have experienced the same frustrations as you, for listeners. So some closing questions. We always tell folks you can take these as seriously or not as you'd like to. If you're Pope for a day, what might you want to do with that day?
Well, I think I would let women into the clergy. That's probably what I would do. Let women become priests.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing I did. And probably, soften the stance on homosexuality.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure the Catholic Church, they're not consensus-based model, right?
They are a top-down model. My book got reviewed by a Catholic in the New York Times, and she was sort of like, I kind of don't get this book. Where people actually get to choose their ministers.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Context matters.
Yeah.
A theologian or historical Christian figure you'd want to meet or bring back to life?
Oh, Meister Eckhart.
Yeah.
The mystic. He just, his via negativa, his theology, his big heart, his mysticism, his hanging out with the Beguines. He just always struck me. I think that there should be a wonderful opera written about Meister Eckhart.
What do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
I think one of the most riveting, destructive presidencies in history.
Yeah.
We've been talking
about problematic leaders.
Problematic leaders.
Problematic leaders for sure.
Destabilizing, leaders, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any hopes that you'd be willing to share about for the future of the church or Christianity?
Well, I believe in Christian values, the basic values of Christ, feeding the poor, taking care of the widows and the orphans, and loving your neighbors, etc. I just hope that can prevail.
Same.
Yeah.
I want to ask too, if I can, this is not on the sheet, but I always like to ask folks just related to their expertise. Writing a sermon, for many pastors, different preachers and pastors have different preaching styles. Some are manuscript based, some are outlined, some will just have a thought and just can go talk about something for 20, 30, 40 minutes. for the folks who are, I think creative writing certainly is important. Man, folks who can do it in pastors make great writers and preachers. What are some, I don't know, creative prompts? Give me anything real quick for folks who are trying to prove their creative writing for preaching or writing or anything else in that field.
Prompts. Well, I have to say, I'm asked to preach occasionally at a small Unitarian Universalist church. And I struggle like any new minister. I'm not that experienced. I would hate to act as an expert there, but I can give you something that helps me in my own writing, which is the timer.
Okay.
Set a timer. Set a timer for 20 minutes and just write. You'll be amazed what comes out of you. It's just that little deadline. And another thing, and this comes from my being a food critic and a restaurant critic, is that the night before I had a column due, I would sit down and write everything I wanted to say about the restaurant. It wouldn't be written. It would just be all of the ideas I wanted to make sure to touch.
Okay.
And then I'd sleep on it. And when you're sleeping, we're patterning creatures, we humans are. And it's letting your unconscious get to work. And then the next day, maybe not in the morning, maybe not until, an hour before it's due, I would be able to write the piece. If I didn't do that preliminary thing, it was agony. So, those are, I guess, two little prompts. One is to use a timer, and the other is to, you know what you want to say in your sermon, more or less. You know what the text is that you're going to preach on.
Yeah.
So just make a list of everything you want to say about that text and let it sit for a while.
That's helpful. I'm writing that down because I don't preach that often myself, but that's something that I found when I was preaching regularly was even after I'd immediately would preach, I'd go look at what my topic and text was just to kind of get it churning, even for just a few minutes to get it churning. So yeah, that's helpful. Well, I thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. And I hope it's helpful for our listeners. And again, how can people connect with you, find your book, all that stuff?
MichelleHuneven.com is my website. But my books are on Amazon and in bookstores. A paperback of my new book, Bug Hollow, is coming out. Search is in paperback now. It's also on audio. It's got a good reader. So it's available in every bookstore. But I want to say, Loren, you're a delight to talk to. I really, I feel energized and inspired by our conversation.
So much. Thank you. We always leave folks with a word of peace, so may God's peace be with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.